Please give a thumbs up or subscribe if you enjoyed this video.
Facing mounting threats from the United States and others, Canadian military strategists want the federal government to create a volunteer defense corps made up of 300,000 citizens.
So, apparently we're building a militia. While we were all distracted by tariffs, Ottawa was quietly drafting a citizens' army to, and I'm not joking here, fend off the Americans. If you thought the trade war was messy, well, wait until you see the war plan.
They call this a citizens' army, and I think, frankly, that's a misrepresentation. I'm not really comfortable with the title. What they're talking about here is developing and maybe improving and enhancing the reserve concept with the Army. We already have reserves, of course, for the Canadian Forces.
Publicly, Canada keeps insisting everything's fine. The relationship with the U.S. is strong, stable, nothing to worry about here.
But privately, the military is mapping out how to recruit and equip 300,000 Canadians for a citizens' reserve, a force large enough to respond to high-intensity conflict. You don't plan something like that unless Ottawa is deeply worried about where our southern neighbor is actually headed.
And the essence of what was being discussed here is essentially to try to find volunteers to join. Nobody's going to be conscripted, by the way. Let me get that out there right now. That this is not anybody's going to be forced. It's not going to be a draft. They're looking for people that can volunteer to be reservists. That's what it is. I don't know who coined the Citizens Army thing, but for those who may not be familiar with the term of reservists, those are people that sign up for the military, but it's like on a part-time basis, as needed basis, if you understand what I'm saying. And I know people in the Hamilton area where I worked for many, many years, of course, that were reservists. We have some regiments, of course, in Hamilton, very famous regiments. And these are people that have other jobs. One I know fairly well is a prominent lawyer in town. But he's also a captain in the reservists. And what they do, of course, is they train in the military. They have training exercises. They are committed to so many weeks per month where they are actually doing military training and military service. So it's not as if these are just people that are doing their thing and then all of a sudden they get a call and said, hey, grab your rifle. Come on, we need you over here. That's not it at all.
Leaked internal documents reveal the Canadian Armed Forces are wholly unprepared for the logistical shock, warning that existing supply chains are broken and that the new citizen army may have to be outfitted with hand-me-down uniforms due to a severe lack of warehousing and equipment.
Internal documents obtained by CBC show the Department of National Defence, the DND, is scrambling to figure out how to clothe, equip, and train a force Canada hasn't attempted to build in generations.
Yeah, this is not a modest expansion. This is a surge big enough to add 100,000 reservists and as many as 300,000 civilian volunteers. And the people inside the system admit that they don't yet know how they're going to actually pull this off.
The Internal Defense Department documents CBC got their hands on paint a pretty blunt picture. Ottawa isn't talking about a little recruitment push here. They're sketching out how you build something the size of an entire city's worth of part-time soldiers. Because you don't plan for 300,000 civilian reservists unless someone, somewhere, thinks the world could tilt fast.
This is an idea that was developed and actually initiated by General Jenny Carrion, who was in charge of the Canadian military, of course. And she has talked about doing something like this. Now, I want to also emphasize something else here, because some people are kind of getting the wrong impression. That this is not the final document. This is not, okay, this is what we're going to do. This is the beginning of the discussion about how to do this. And I think, personally, as I mentioned on the podcast, I think it makes an awful lot of sense. I mean, Prime Minister Carney has committed Canada to a deeper and a more intense involvement in NATO. And that's a good thing. I mean, given the situation of what's going on in the world these days, that we need to have that commitment. And here's the thing. It's great that we're going to buy fighter jets. I still prefer the Swedish model, by the way, but that's another discussion. And the submarines, etc. But you need people. All right. You need people. You need people to run these things. You need people to do the research. You need people to do intelligence gathering. And we don't have enough of them. And I know that there is an uptick right now in the number of people that have signed up for the military, and that's great news. they're getting more money. And that's one of the first things Prime Minister Carney did, was increase their salary and benefits, and that was a good thing. But there are reservists, and that we need to increase that. And what this program is doing is basically looking for people that will volunteer, and they'll go through the process that I just described, right? You know, they'll get their military training, and you know, so the question I'm asking here is, would you volunteer? When they get to that point, and we're not there yet, when they get to that point where they're looking for people to sign up here and be volunteers for the military. In other words, they call it the People's Army, a Citizens Army. But anyway, it's the Citizens Army or the Reserves. That's really what I think the correct term is here. Would you do it?
And you can feel the tension in the way the military describes its own situation. Everything, it's already at capacity. Supply chains, inventory, training, all of those are maxed out. We can barely re-equip the regular force as it is. So when the briefing notes float the idea of handing out retired uniforms because the new ones could take 2 years to arrive, well, that's not a country casually refreshing its wardrobe. That's a country trying to buy time.
Defence Minister David McGuinty says he hasn't discussed cutting services to fund Military Defence Minister, addressing the funding and logistical realities facing the Canadian military during this mobilisation push.
Finance Minister Champagne is being referenced in 2 different newspapers today, saying that he sent out a letter asking for substantial cuts to many departments, all departments, to bring down their spending to pay for military procurement and so on. Is your department, is DND, part of those cuts that Minister Champagne's asking for?
I just received that letter. I haven't had a chance to talk to my colleague, but I have been part of no discussions with respect to, for example, significant social services cuts at a federal level in order to achieve our defense priorities.
Canada needs to figure out how to grow a force quickly after decades of assuming peace was the default. Well, that's what happens when you're the steady neighbor and the guy next door suddenly stops taking his meds. Canada isn't planning for a what-if situation. It's responding to a world that doesn't feel as calm or stable as it used to be.
And the chief of the defense staff summed it up more honestly than really anyone probably intended. They're planning to plan. Now, that's not very reassuring. That's a senior military leader telling the country, we see the storm forming and we're scrambling to build the roof before it actually hits. And honestly, you can feel the urgency between the lines. The sense that the world is shifting faster than Canada's old assumptions can keep up with.
They've even created a brand new mobilization office, the first of its kind. It's basically tasked with asking the question no one wants to say out loud. How do we scale up if we suddenly have to? It's a kind of position you create when you don't like the answers you're getting from the old system.
And having a strong reservist element to our military, I think, is key. And as I say, I know a number of the European nations have done this for years, and they've even admitted that, yeah, well, maybe we slacked off a little more than we should have in the last little while. I think there's a willingness from an awful lot of Canadian people right now to not necessarily be part of this, if some will, but that we need to do this. And I think there's going to be a huge intake and an uptake on this from the Canadians. That, yeah, it's about time that we did this sort of thing and that we played our role in NATO. NATO is a far more important entity than it was even 5 years ago, especially because of what Donald Trump is doing with the military and what he's doing with NATO.
So where does all of this leave us? With a Canada that's trying to adapt to a reality it never wanted, a world where our closest ally is suddenly unpredictable, inward-looking, and willing to use economic pressure as a political weapon. We're not preparing for conflict because we expect one. We're preparing because the assumptions that kept this continent stable for 70 years can't be taken for granted anymore.
And that's why conversations like this are so important. Canadians are rightfully anxious, not because we dislike America, but because we've always believed in what America could be. A partner, a leader, a force for cooperation instead of domination. And we want that version of the United States back. We want the country we grew up with, not the one being warped by a man who sees allies as obstacles, democracy as negotiable, and being president as a way to make a quick buck.
Thanks for watching. Please give a thumbs up or subscribe if you enjoyed this video. See you next time.